In this seminar, I will discuss and question the statistical relationships between people's involvement with religious faiths, household dynamics and traditions, and acceptance of others. These elements have become a common issue discussed in the media, scholarly journals, and publications. These topics can be interwoven partially due to the recent controversy over legalized gay marriage in various parts of the world. This has sparked concern from various religious faiths and the public generally. Additionally, the increase of single and same-sex parent families over the last half-century has increased due to the rise in social acceptance and the simultaneous advances of medical procedures allowing these people to conceive biological children. This has again raised eyebrows in religions that disapprove of the home dynamic and unnatural conception method, with social commentators often speaking their minds in terms of the compromise of a traditional family. The data used in this survey was found from the World Value Survey conducted in over 100 countries, asking questions about aspects and beliefs on life and home in the community and in the country. The first graph I present shows the amounts of people who identify as religious, non-religious, or atheists. Of the 97% of people surveyed who answered the question, 69.3% identified as a religious person, 22.4% stated they were not religious, and the remaining 4.9% were convinced atheists. This univariate analysis displays a comparison between the three nominal variables of the question asked. Religious people include those who regularly or sometimes practice their faith through rituals, worship, or ceremonies, for example, attending church weekly or important holy days of each year. Non-religious people are those who practice no faith or are not baptized, excluding convinced atheists, those who believe there is no God. To gather a further understanding of the idea of a traditional household, Mates defines a typical Western society family of the mid-20th century as a family unit that includes two married parents of opposite genders and their biological or adopted children living in the same residence. Since the 1950s, the decrease in populations of religious denomination followings have seen more and more families veering away from the traditional formation. Carter states that in Alabama, 29% of families with children are headed by single parents. Carter also mentions that non-traditional families may be single parents, foster parents, multiracial parents, grandparents raising children, same-sex parents, and blended households, all of which have increased substantially since the late 60s. The first section of my analysis looks at the results from the survey in terms of the correlation between the validity of marriage in today's society against people's confidence in the church, or in other words, their connection with God. The results showed that when people were asked their opinion of the statement, marriage is an outdated institution, 83% of the total population disagreed. Unsurprisingly, half of the remaining 17% who agreed with the statement claimed that they had not much or no confidence in the church. Another statistic that coincides with the religious belief that marriage and traditional households are acceptable is that 89.9% of people who have strong confidence in their church believe that a child needs a home with both a mother and a father. Continuing on this trend, 65.7% of church-confident people disapprove of women being single parents in households. Overall, 53% of the population disapprove of women as single mothers, and 14% stated that their approval depends on the situation that the mother is in. As the graph interestingly shows, when the confidence of the church decreases, the approval of women as single mothers increases. To paraphrase the data just presented, only 17% of the population agrees that the institution of marriage is outdated. 85% of those surveyed agree that a child needs a home with both a mother and a father, and just over half the population disapproves of women being single parents. As it can be seen, the data relates to the overall disapproval of untraditional households in terms of structure in the home. The next section of the seminar will include the comparisons of surveyed populations' confidence in the church, along with their thoughts of groups of people in society that could hypothetically become their neighbour. These groups of people include unmarried couples living together, homosexuals, and lastly, people of a different religion. Those with a great deal of confidence in the church, 33% of the total 22% of the population, mentioned that they would not like to neighbour an unmarried couple living together. However, 77.8% of the population who answered the same question did not mention any issue with the hypothetical situation. As the trend of the data of this seminar continues to prevail, it can be seen that when confidence in the church decreases, the amount of people who do not mention an issue increases. Furthermore, 58.7% of church-confident people would not favour the situation of living aside a homosexual person, which adds to the total of 46.7% of the overall population who share the same belief. A trend is seen in this comparative crosstab, showing that as the confidence within the church decreases, the acceptance of a homosexual neighbour increases. The final comparison made in this section of the seminar is the tolerance of people neighbouring someone belonging to a different religion. 76.3% of church-confident people did not mention any issues about potentially residing next to a household following a different faith, contributing to the 83.4% of the total population sharing the same mindset. To paraphrase this section of data, 16.6% of all people mention an issue residing next to a person of a different religion. 22.2% of the population were not fussed over living next to a household of an unmarried couple, and a relatively substantial 46.7% of the overall population mentioned that they may have issues having a homosexual neighbour or neighbours. This again relates back to the somewhat disapproval of the untraditional households and families, more than partially for those with full confidence in the church. To continue on this tangent, those who identify whether or not they have a strong connection with God will be compared against the population's personal level of justification of homosexuality. Firstly, the population was asked to indicate how important God is in their lives on a scale of 1, not at all important, to 10, very important. The second interval variable was answered by the population indicating how justifiable the action of homosexuality is on a scale of 1, never justifiable, to 10, always justifiable. As this section contained two interval or scaled variables, the data required a Pearson's R test. The Pearson's R is negative 0.325, which was then derived to an R squared result of 0.11 or 11%. This ultimately means that there is an 11% correlation between people's justification of homosexuality and the importance of God in their lives. A much stronger correlation between the two variables would possibly mean that the people who are close with God would assumedly agree with the belief that homosexuality is against their moral code and therefore beliefs. Furthermore, a stronger correlation would mean that those who have minimal or no connection with God would be more accepting of homosexuality, as their technically non-religious ways would not incorporate them closely adhering to historic morals and or teachings of a faith. It can be concluded that in general terms, the surveyed population tends to agree with the structures of a traditional household. It was seen that most people believe that the institute of marriage is not outdated, and that those with a great deal of confidence in the Church were collectively more supportive of families with two parents of opposing gender. Also, it can be seen that the general population would not mention any issues if new neighbours belonged to a different religion or were unmarried couples. However, just less than half of the total population mentioned an issue in regards to potentially neighbouring homosexual persons. The trends that were mainly consistent in parts 1 and 2 of the seminar were supported in the final analysis, that the importance of God in one's life does indeed influence their justification of homosexuality to a certain extent, or in this case 11%. Ultimately, this proves that the general population tends to support the ideologies of the traditional household and the accompanying ways of life.